resurrection happened, because he can take a dead body and make it living.
Well, the only demonstration of that is that you guys made up God out of nothing.
This one coming in from Do Appreciate Your Question, Deej, says, Aron, are you saying that Jesus wasn't real?
I'm not entirely sure about that. I think that there was some core inspirations for the Jesus character. I don't think there was just one. I don't think you could, if you had a time machine and a guide who spoke Aramaic, I don't think you could find the Jesus you're looking for. If you found a Jesus, it wouldn't be the Jesus you wanted.
You got it. This one coming in from, I think that's actually Samir. Thanks for your final question. We've got, says, why did birds that lived away from humans for thousands of years develop the ability to speak the time that those who lived with us didn't? This is God's way.
What? That
Speak the time? I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Does anybody know what that means?
Is he saying that birds evolved the ability to speak even though they weren't living near humans for their model?
Okay, right. Okay. So
I think so.
Yeah.
If I could read it one more time, just in case anybody else didn't get it. I think I get what you mean, but they say, why did birds, and then Dr. T will kick it right over to you. So they said, why did birds that lived away from humans for thousands of years develop the ability to speak during the time that those who lived with us didn't?
So
the birds that would live with us.
I'd be real simple about it. Certain species are not going to just spontaneously learn how to speak because they happen to live with humans. There's just, it has to be something that's naturally selected for. It has to serve a purpose. We know that birds have learned how to sing or vocalize because it confers a selective advantage. It's typically something across many of these species that we see just males that sing, and they're advertising to females, and they're using it in a very reproductive context. So that's my answer to that.
You got it. And thank you very much. High Flyer says, I'm not sure if there's a God of the universe, but I do know there's a God of modern day debate, and his name is Aron. You got a fan out there, Aron. This one from KD5681 says, keep up the great work, Aron. I learned a lot from you.
Yeah, got to give some love to Chris because he did a really extraordinary job here.
I appreciate that. Thanks. Yeah.
Yes.
100%.
Same on the other side too. I really appreciate the conversation that we've had so far.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
This has been fantastic. I've got to say, I appreciate that you guys have had the perfect mix of being cordial and also being passionate. That makes it fun. It's fun. It's just nice when it walks that line. It's just right, kind of Goldilocks of where it's passionate and yet it's not going off the rails. It's reasonable still. So I appreciate it. This has been a fantastic debate. I want to say thanks to everybody watching. Our guests are linked in the description. So there are 712 people watching right now, and I'm sure this is going to get tens of thousands of views. Folks, I got to tell you, our guests are linked in the description. So if you'd like to learn more about their positions, you certainly can by clicking down below. I highly encourage you. You can check out those links right now, including if you're listening via the podcast. All of the Modern Day Debate debates end up on the podcast. If you didn't know that, folks, it's ad-free. We don't make a dime off of it. So I highly encourage you to check it out on your favorite podcast app. But our guests are linked there as well. So you can find Aron's, Dr. Thompson's, and Cindy's and Sal's links in the description box of the podcast too. So check those links out. Want to say one last thank you to our guests. It's been a true pleasure to have you. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you so much, James. Yep, this has been fun.
My pleasure. And hold on,
See
sorry.
the after show.
This is we got just two last ones. This is Samir Farzane says, Sal, you're smart.
Oh
but
my
you're talking
gosh,
enough.
that's a huge dog. Is that a bear? I'm sorry to interrupt you, James.
That is
what
a big
the heck
one.
is that?
It's a Great Pyrenees.
Really?
He was a rescue. He walked into my house like he lived here because his owners threw him away.
Oh, Aron, you scored.
I love it.
Scored.
This one
Sorry,
from
James.
two last ones, they snuck them in. It was a compliment from Samir. Says, Sal, you're smart. You don't talk enough. They want to hear you talk more. Syrupy says, I stand Dr. Thompson. To your point, I hear starlings in the parking lot of my work mimic car alarms.
Yeah, they do. They're amazing mimics. So you can even get starlings to vocalize and even make some human noises too. So they're awesome.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yep.
Well,
Whales sing too.
With that,
Cindy and I have an after show on my channel, just FYI.
You want
You
to do
got it.
Amy's or yours?
I'm streaming as well. If people want to come into my channel, they
Oh,
can.
no.
I know. I don't mean to
Are you-
steal everyone, but
And
happy to
folks,
answer some more questions and talk a little bit with people too. So
remember,
Sadly, I
folks,
have deadlines I have to meet. I've got projects I've got to jump into editing, and I was up all night last night. I'm probably going to be up all night tomorrow.
get some sleep.
you got it.
God
We'll let
bless
you go.
Aaron.
Thanks so
Yeah.
much. I'll be
Thank
back in
you.
just a moment, folks, with a post-credit scene for about a few minutes. Stick around. Thanks, everybody. You're free birds. Thank you so much. It's been a true pleasure. Really, seriously, it's been fun. And so, yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your night. And let me know if I can add links to the description or anything like that, or send you a copy of the debate, whatever's useful.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Chris,
Cindy,
it's been a
one more
pleasure.
time on that invitation.
I actually want to say something to you, Aron. I watched a little bit of your stuff on foundations, and you said something about this quote. Bilking little old ladies of their prayer donations and undeserved respect given by sheep following manipulative fakes.
Yep. Yep.
I agree on that.
I've got to run to the post-credit show.
Sure. Yep.
I
Bye,
want to say thank
everybody.
you all.
Yes.
Have
this
a
has
great
been a lot
rest
of
of your
fun.
night.
Yeah. Thanks.
Nice
You
to
too.
meet you.
Nice meeting
Take
you
care.
too.
Here.
Night.
I'll put you in contact, Cindy and Aron, if you'd like to continue that conversation. Otherwise, I've got to run though.
Feel free to share my
Thank you.
email as well
Good
if
night.
you'd like.
We'll do.
Thank you for
Thanks.
inviting me, Chris.
Yeah. It's been fun.
Thank you for coming, Aron.
Thanks, Aron.
We'll be in
Thanks,
touch,
Dr.
Aron.
And
Chris.
Chris.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Good night.
Thanks, James. Thank you, James.
My pleasure.
All right. All right. Well, that was fun. No, I'm not going to remove that, but what I will do is expand this. Okay. I don't know how many people we have here. Let me go to my channel. I've got 2 watching. All right. Great. All right, everybody. Thanks for showing up. All right, I'm watching my stream here. And going to catch up on some questions. So I had mentioned, if you guys can look in the chat, I don't know if Edmund Sine is still here. Probably not. He's one of my students. And it's very nice of him to show up and just crack up. So we had a meeting earlier, and I mentioned that I was doing this. He said that I should talk to the whole class and let them know, and I said, no way, I'm not going to do that. But yeah, he's got some interesting points in here, and I know that this is a tricky issue for a lot of people. Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm not going to make it a new stream. I'm going to do it right here. So Nestling's asking, where's the link? I suppose I could make a new stream, but I think that if I put it in here, this is okay too. I appreciate it. Yeah, my brain gets too damaged. So I've watched a fair number of Sal debates. Obviously, that's why I went ahead and did some digging in topoisomerase and trying to break it down in a very simple way, that there's a phylogenetic relationship that we can see in topoisomerase. And yeah, in general, I find him to be very cordial in many of his debates. And certainly he didn't talk a whole lot. But I think what happened, I could see him getting agitated in a way that I hadn't seen before. And it was mostly because I know that he does not want to talk about the age of the earth. He doesn't want to talk about fossils. These are things that he just doesn't know. And we nailed him on that. So I don't know what else to say. An open mic hangout. So what do you mean by that? Yes, my EEE degree was back at the School of Life Sciences days at UIUC. So I take it you know about UIUC. Yeah, thanks so much for the positive comments here. I really appreciate it. So I'm not super active on this YouTube channel, but I'm planning on expanding it. That's part of the reason why I reached out to Modern Day Debates. I'm looking to add content that's going to be about, say, the evolution of the brain, but also touching on neuroscience topics, going in depth on certain neuroscience topics, covering certain papers that have been published that I find to be super interesting. I also, if you're interested in learning about the brain, I have lectures from my class that are, I think are pretty well put together. The first several, the audio is not super great, but I improved my audio over the pandemic, and it's I think that I do a decent job explaining how the brain works. So some of that can be kind of interesting for some of you who want to learn about it. Let's see. So what do we got in here? Yeah, Cindy was just intentionally blocking thoughts. Yeah, right. Just like, I don't believe it. Yeah, okay. Sounds good. No mechanism whatsoever. Yeah, Sal was getting frustrated because I don't want to talk about any other topic other than molecular biology stuff. And absolutely, like, that's his strategy. He knows that he cannot talk about mechanism as far as how did the intelligent designer go about designing. When you talk about intelligent design and you think that we can look at irreducibly complex structures like the mousetrap, maybe there's some implication that that could be a design structure, but we know that mousetraps are designed because we can go to the mousetrap factory and look to see the people putting together mousetraps. And we have plans of how that was done, and we can describe how that was done. And that's the thing that he doesn't have any description for. And this idea that these enzymes, the collagen is designed, it doesn't work with replicating systems in cells that have been around. If you're already going to concede that these cells have been around for billions of years, and you know some of the underlying mechanisms of generating variation and natural selection, unfortunately you lose the record of like where these different protein families have emerged from. But we know that they've evolved, and we know that we can see the evolution of within the protein families at the very least, and we know that certain proteins can be completely co-opted to do different things. So people can come in and hang out and talk to you directly, but if you don't want that, that's fine too. So let me see how I can do that. I don't mind having people talk. Would I do that here? Switch with your voice. No, that's not it. I don't know how to do that. I'll have to look for that for next time. So, and I like doing these streams, and I definitely plan on having other people pop in. I'll have to figure out how to do that. So let's see. Conflating belief with fact, for sure that's the case. Oh, topoisomerase. Yes. No, don't worry about that. I think everyone knew what you were talking about. I like how James struggles with the names of these things, and he's got to describe them because it's not his specialty. Let's see. I'm a geologist, and the second testable point was already shown to be wrong. Beamsy, what was that second point? I'm trying to remember what that was. Curious about the squid. Oh, so like squid as far as that they were used as an important animal model. Super fascinating story. So these squids, the giant squid was, we knew that we could dissect them. We could see how their nervous system looked, and we realized very early on that they don't have myelin. So one thing that makes neurons in vertebrate systems fire relatively quickly is that we have these very thin, long processes called axons, and for certain parts of the nervous system, they get covered up with other cells, these Schwann cells, that we call myelin, and it creates these nodes of Ranvier that allow action potentials to go faster down if they are unmyelinated, and it can make a huge difference. It can make a difference of about an order of magnitude in speed. So it allows for the nervous system to be very fast. Now, cephalopods, which the squid is one of them, did not have this process. They do not have myelin. Yet they do have a relatively complex system, and they can react relatively quickly. Their way to get around this was just to make the axon bigger so that conduction velocity can go down faster or down bigger axons. And we know in vertebrate systems that axon diameter can vary The bigger ones are faster than the thinner ones. So we see the same thing in vertebrate systems as we do in invertebrate systems. But their solution to this was to just make really big axons. And that meant that it was really easy to use the technology in the 1950s to record from those axons, see how neurons work and how synapses work. So a lot of what we know about how synapses work and how the action potential works, that was all work that was done in the 1950s using squid axons. The protein game seems like a big cannibalistic mess. Yeah, I mean, I know that that's Sal's go-to. That it's an argument from incredulity is what it is. So he knows that he doesn't have an explanation for the organization of the fossil record. He doesn't have an explanation for the phylogenetic sorting that we see, even when you look at genetics, or for basic comparative morphology. And the way Aron described it, I mean, he just nailed it over and over again, that we have these, cladistics that his example of like two organisms, you show them any two organisms, same species, different species, you can say that they are different. And then if you add a third one, you can always find two that are going to be more similar than the third. And that's just nails it, the way this organization of variation within species and across species, that we can then add additional organisms and find that cladistics. And it works just basically on overall comparative morphology. But then the genetics matches that. And the genetics works as this timeline of defining when the last common ancestor was, say, between chimps and humans or humans and mice. So, yeah, he said the phylogeny of topoisomerase was a big mess. I was so glad when he said that, because I spent, 45 minutes when I should have been working on my grant, blasting the human topoisomerase gene against these other model organisms, and I thought, like, okay, it's not that much of a mess. And that figure that he showed, I don't know where that came from, but I assume that it's probably from some paper on evolution of topoisomerase and looking at how these different topoisomerases are related to each other. Yeah, just blasted right through it. And the same with collagen. He has collagen up there. You can find papers. In fact, let me show. I can got a paper right here, and I haven't looked at this paper, but I know he's showing collagen. And let's see, window capture. I'm gonna make myself small. The evolution of collagens. I've not read this paper. I googled this while they were talking. And I know that collagen is more than just a single protein. There's a family of collagens. They actually do multiple functions, including in the nervous system. So we kind of think of collagens as being like this extracellular matrix thing. They're heavily found in bones and other tissues. They make up the most dominant protein within the body. But there are certain kinds of collagens that have been repurposed to do signaling mechanisms within the nervous system. So because these are found in the extracellular matrix outside of cells, in the brain, certain kinds of collagens can be expressed at certain places within the brain. And now that is a signaling mechanism for receptors that will be sensitive to that collagen to get them to line up and get wired up in a certain way. So completely different purpose. Okay. So Nestle, you've got the paper from which that figure came from. Explanation they proposed for the origin seems really detailed, but Sal just glosses over it. That doesn't surprise me. And I made a very simple phylogenetic tree because, one, I knew that they also want to talk about model organisms, and they had this weird explanation for God making model organisms to help solve health conditions and better understand health conditions in humans. It's like, okay. Yeah, so I wanted to make it simple, so I can understand why you wouldn't want it too complex, but right, I mean, he's just glossing over it, and it's a field that I don't know, right? I'm a neuroscientist. I'm not going to invest the time into figuring all of that out. I did enough to show that, like, okay, you want to gloss over the phylogeny, I can make it really simple. I can tell people how to look at this themselves. They can go to the NCBI protein database and look up any protein they want and compare it to other proteins and other species. You can do the same thing that I did. I commend you for making it through a debate with Sal and maintaining your cool despite all of his dishonesty. Yeah, I am agnostic on whether he's truly dishonest or just delusional. I mean, I think that he's a nice guy. He seems nice, but it is odd dealing with someone who has such a distorted view of how to perceive the world that, oh, I just take this on faith. This is a faith belief that the earth is only 6,000 years old and that there was a flood, and that I know that there's all this evidence for fossil sorting, but I'm just going to ignore it all completely. And it's like, how can you do that for yourself? Found several papers on the origin of the topoisomerases. I didn't look that deeply. Not all questions are answered, of course, but these proteins exhibit clear modularity, not irreducible complexity. That's kind of was my impression too. Like this is topoisomerase. Like he has these videos that he shows in some of his YouTube clips where he's showing the topoisomerase, and many molecular biologists can fall into this trap of making these things look very machine-like, and honestly, it's not machine-like. That's not how it works. Right. So, oh, great. Thank you, Gene. Let's see. I think I missed a couple. Figures come from the same place drawn from the back passage. Yeah. Yeah, the universe certainly loves to repurpose itself. And I think that's one of the themes that you can see in evolution, that you see structures get reused and repurposed. The animal model that I work with, the African clawed frog, the thing that's interesting about that is that within that group of frogs, the pinnipeds, they're different than the other kinds of frogs. They're fully aquatic. They also have kind of a slightly different morphology. They look like frogs, but they're not really quite like frogs. They're much more sort of hydrodynamic. But the other thing is that we've seen multiple evolutions of chromosome duplication in those frogs. So the species I work with is tetraploid. So their entire genome has been duplicated. And there's another lab here at Virginia Tech that's actually working on the evolution of how certain species of Xenopus has not had this duplication and other species have, and where that descent occurred and when those events actually occurred, those duplications of the entire chromosome set. And what we find in Xenopus laevis, the species that I work with, that separate set of chromosomes, sometimes there's suppression of the genes that are on there, but sometimes they get changed and expressed in very different ways. And now you have a whole new set of genes to create basically what are different isoforms, giving them different roles to play. And that's the thing about evolution, that you can have this abrupt event of duplicating a set of one chromosome or a portion of a chromosome or the entire set of chromosomes. And that gives evolution then a lot of room to then change things and go through mutation and natural selection. And that's the thing that we see over and over again. But even if we have no answer for topoisomerases, Sal doesn't want to jump to therefore design. Sal has to propose an explanation that stands on its own merits. That's the point I was trying to hit over and over and over again. That you have to have some kind of mechanism to explain the design and production of topoisomerases that would then also explain why we see this phylogenetic relationship of, say, topoisomerase being identical in chimps and humans, but only 63% identical when you look at roundworms versus humans. Or why topoisomerase is 88% similar between birds and humans, but if you compare any two species of birds, it's going to be nearly 100%. You have to have an explanation for that. RNA, for example, might suggest that species A was more closely related to species B than species C, but a tree made from DNA would suggest the reverse. My brain is, it's nearly 11 here on the East Coast, and I don't know if I'm following what you're saying. I think what you're saying, I'm kind of missing. Saying the designer did is not an explanation. That is exactly the point. And that's the thing about irreducible complexity. It is not an argument of, some sort of mechanism to propose that these things are actually like designed and created. It's an argument of complex incredulity. That's really all it is. It's, I don't believe that this came about from evolution, therefore it must be created. It must be designed. And it's not enough. You have to have some explanation of how it happened. Yeah, like a second piano to work with. Tim, that's a great point. It's hard to understand the intentional ignorance, but there's definitely something attractive and digestible to believe that something has purpose for you in your life. I mean, I would agree with that. And honestly, there's, I don't want to... Oh, James, you're in my class. Pop quiz tomorrow, maybe. Yeah, of course. And I think, I didn't want to make it a debate. And I know that James, the host of Modern Day Debates, put up Christians versus atheists, which I suppose technically I am an atheist, but that's not really the point. And I tried to make that in my opening, that evolution is an issue that is separate from the question of whether there's God or not. It is just what is our basic observation of the world, and do we have can we explain it via natural mechanisms? And there's a lot that we can explain. Not everything. Origins of topoisomerase, for instance. No, we're not necessarily going to be doing that. But as far as like overall purpose, then I do feel like that is one of the things that atheism does struggle with, is that it doesn't necessarily then bring to people a sense of purpose or something that you have to have in your life. Now, that philosophy can come from other things, and I have a lot more I could say about that, but I don't want to get into it too much. Beamsy, it's not the fact that it's late more than you had to deal with. Yeah, it might be that. My brain might be a bit mush. Sal's entire game is about evolution cannot answer this question, therefore intelligent design. And then creationism wins. That's, of course, his entire argument. And it's a bogus argument, because you still have to come up with some explanation for how these things came about, how they were designed. And you can't just focus on that. You have to have some explanation for the vast array of what we see out in the world, of the fossil evidence, biogeography, which is something we didn't touch on, but the fact that Australia is filled with all these different kinds of marsupials, some of which seem to be very similar to the kinds of placental mammals that we find in the other continents. And that, how did that come about? Was that through... I mean, we know that there was a common ancestor for marsupials that must have made their way to Australia, and they took up the various niches of predator and prey and grass feeding and going up into trees. We find the same things happen in the areas where there's placental mammals. It's convergent evolution, and you have to have an explanation for that. And they think that all that was just specially created. Yeah, that's the thing. Too many fingers point to evolution as models of the correct theory. It just does. Absolutely. More the idea. Yeah, comfort. Gap of the gods. God of the gaps. Same thing. The onus of proof and explanation falls upon the theist by definition. It does. You're right. I mean, that's one of the arguments for saying that people who are agnostic truly are atheists, because, well, if you're agnostic and you don't really know, that means you don't believe, and therefore you are without belief. And atheist means without belief, right? And that the explanation for, how these things came about, if you're going to make an argument for God or Jesus or Vishnu did all this, then you have to come up with some reasonable mechanism to explain it. So, Sal has vibes of flat Earth. Yeah, I mean, I think all of these, and that's one of the things I don't really care about for modern day debates. I think that it's fun. This is a fun thing. but it's often these debates over these really sort of quirky goofball conspiracy theory type things, and I would say creationism definitely falls in the line of being very conspiracy theory-ish, where there's huge lapses of logic, where they think that if they can have this one proof to prove that this one thing is then false, then everything else that they want to say is then true. It's very similar kind of arguing. It reminds me of the movie Gods Must Be Crazy. Yeah. So, yeah, is there a measurable difference in the brains of believers? There's data out here on this. It depends on the kind of believer you're talking about. There's actually some really interesting work on the differences between when people, say, are speaking in tongues versus if they're in a meditative state. So if someone's in a meditative state, we know that there's a suppression of the activity in the somatosensory cortex. And when people are in that meditative state, I almost feel like they might be having like an out-of-body experience. And if you're suppressing the activity in the somatosensory cortex, you could imagine then that you're actually having this diminishment of any sense of your body itself, right? And it would explain the conception of like, I feel outside of my body. So for those people, though, that are having sort of speaking in tongues, we actually see hyperactivity in the somatosensory cortex, which, of course, if you ever see them, they're shaking and they're violently talking and like highly activating their overall body. So, but as far as like structural differences, I don't know. I know that there are studies out there, suggesting that there may be differences, including between like conservative and liberal belief as well. I don't know how strong those studies are, and it's also kind of out of my area of expertise, so I don't want to say too much about it. I'll have to look into it though. Oh man, well that was fun. It's basically they're getting themselves high. So certainly, when you're in ecclesiastical state, you're definitely going to be activating those kinds of brain areas that are going to be rewarding. Absolutely. Can atheists still believe in religion? Yes, of course. You could say that Buddhism, in its many forms, there are many different forms of Buddhism, but many of those forms, like, they are essentially atheists. And then, I wanted to mention that, here in Blacksburg, even though I suppose I'm technically atheist, I do go to the Unitarian Universalist Church here in Blacksburg. And there are people there that also are kind of, I don't know about God, but plenty of people who do. And it's a good experience. And that's part of like what, it was James that was saying that, right? Yeah, about like having that connection to community. And that's the thing that religion can't offer, but you don't necessarily have to believe with it. Fascinated with people with phantom limbs, showing that our minds construct a map of our body. It sometimes feel more real than the body itself. So this is one of the courses that I teach here at Virginia Tech is on neuroplasticity. I've thought about creating a whole series of just kind of shorter videos on aspects of neuroplasticity, and phantom limbs is one of the most fascinating topics in neuroscience, especially with respect to neuroplasticity, because there's incredible change that can occur and these weird things that can emerge with phantom limbs. So, I think that it's fascinating too. I totally love that. It does show how powerful denial is, therefore we should all challenge our own ideas. Yep, it's true. How much of our brain is phantom space? Well, that's the thing. So most of our brain is not. So the idea of phantom limbs, I don't know if I kind of skipped over this. Clearly, Neslig knows. When you have a loss of a limb, what the individual who has lost that limb, they will feel like the limb is still there. And we refer to that as a phantom limb. And it's because even though you have lost the arm, there's still the representation of the arm in your brain, and actually on the opposite side of your brain. That is still there despite the fact that you have lost the arm. And the weird thing is that so many of the proprioceptive and pain neurons that get cut off, they don't actually die. Many of them survive, and they reorganize So all these nerve endings that would be at the tips of your fingers and in your hand, they all reorganize to at the stump of where the amputation occurred. But all of that is still represented in your brain. So you feel like you have your forearm and your hand, but it's mostly just on the stump. But our brain perceives it as actually the arm still being there. And some of that can get miswired and cause a lot of pain. And it can be hugely painful because they'll feel like they have pain happening in the phantom limb, but there's no limb there, and they have nothing that they can explain for it. So the normal, a neurotypical brain isn't going to have that phantom space. The phantom space is when the limb has been cut off, and now that available cortical space is there to sort of freely sort of change, maybe maintaining some representation of the arm, but actually there's some shifting that can occur too, which is super fascinating too. How did color adaptation evolve? Chameleons or species camouflaging themselves? Let's see. I don't have a very thorough explanation for that. I can say that I've done some work on overall color adaptation, so I know a little bit about it. We have these really amazing cells in some of those animals that are known as melanophores. And in animals like chameleons, they have a complex set of what these cells look like. And some of that is innervated so they can control that as well. And then some of it is just directed by like the way the light in the brain works. I should actually do a whole video on this because it's a super interesting phenomenon. And I might even just talk about my paper because why not promote myself a little bit? But how it evolved, it's hard for me to say. I don't actually. I could come up with an explanation maybe 3 hours ago, but I can't do it right now. Let's see. Read any papers on the Florida snail kite hawk? I have not. Nature, Ecology, and Evolution. I will copy that and make a note to look at that. V.S. Ramachandran has done a lot of work on. He's an excellent speaker, so I encourage anyone here who's still watching to look at talks from V.S. Ramachandran. He's a professor of neuroscience at University of California, San Diego, cognitive neuroscientist, and he's worked with a bunch of phantom limb patients, and he's developed this idea of that we can use mirror therapy to deal with the phantom limb syndrome. So some of our understanding of where our limbs are does come from visual feedback. Obviously, proprioceptive feedback, like where our limbs are located, that's something that's internal inside our muscles and in our joints. But we do use vision as well. And one thing that we can do is that if you have a missing limb, you can put it in a mirror box. So you're covering up the limb and it's in a mirror box. And I put my other hand right here. Where's the camera? Put my other hand right here. So imagine this is in a mirror box. And I can then look at this hand and squeeze my right hand, and it might be that my brain is thinking I'm able to release the tension that is in my hand. And it's super fascinating. So, rapid morphological change on a top predator with the invasion of a novel prey is the title of the article. Oh, that sounds super interesting. I love that kind of stuff. I had the good fortune 6 months ago to see a talk from the Grants. It's this power couple from, where are they at? I think they're at Harvard, but they're famous for having done research on Darwin's finches and showing some of these rapid changes that can occur from, within a couple of generations, because the populations are so small and they do it in such intricate detail. So they can find over just several generations, like huge changes that are happening, matching the changes that are happening on the islands. And now their more recent research is on that, like with global warming, we see massive change happening to those islands, and we see the finches there responding to the sort of warming induced changes in the environment on those islands in the Galapagos. I personally have not done any research on addiction. I know a fair amount about it. I have to teach about it. That's what I got to say about that. So mirror experiments, do drugs help him to be more effective? I have no idea. I could imagine things like ketamine helping quite a bit. You know, ketamine is now emerged as this kind of miracle drug for treating persistent SSRI, immune depression, and other mental health disorders. And ketamine serves as this, pretty significant, massive, excitatory agonist, allowing for change to then sort of be unlocked in the brain and to release themselves. And I could imagine that mirror experiments might help with ketamine. I don't know, though. It's a great idea. All right. This has been fun. Thanks for everyone showing up. I'm not going to say like smash the subscribe button or whatever and hit the bell, but if you do, I'd appreciate that. Because it'll help me get motivated to create more content like this. Hopefully I'll see you guys at another debate. I assume, things went well enough that James will probably invite me on again. And I think it held up well enough. So I'm going to get going. I have to teach class in, 10 hours. So fortunately it's on the song control system and songbirds, something I know very well. So this has been fun, guys. Take care. And we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.